Hello and welcome to the first of two special editions of Close-Ups dedicated to Pittsburgh CLO's annual production of A Musical Christmas Carol. I'm Mark Fleischer, your host. Today we have a show with two segments. First, we're going to visit with three young actors who over the years have played the iconic role of Tiny Tim. And then we're going to have some special guests in the second half of the show you're not going to want to miss. Of course, it doesn't just have to be me asking the questions. If you want to be part of the conversation, if you have questions or thoughts to share, please feel free to use the comment section. And of course, we will end our show today with your Throwback Thursday video. Close-Up streams live on Facebook and YouTube every other Thursday at 5 p.m. You can also watch this episode and any of our past episodes since the show was launched in April by visiting the CLO Facebook page, YouTube channel, or the CLO website, pittsburghclo.org. No matter how or when you catch our show, please like us, share us, make a comment, and tell your friends about us. Or you can send me an email. There's my email address. You can send me an email and to tell me about what you think about the show, or you could suggest future topics. And I, of course, will answer any of your Pittsburgh CLO questions. Now, A Musical Christmas Carol premiered at Pittsburgh CLO in 1996 at the Byham Theater in Pittsburgh's Cultural District. Now, at that time, our executive producer then, Charlie Gray, thought it would be a one-year thing. However, as many of you know, the show's reception has now established it as a Pittsburgh holiday tradition spanning 28 years. Now, not only do families attend the show to get into Christmas spirit, each year, more than 7,000 school children attend the show at our specially reduced-priced 10 a.m. matinees. After 28 years, that's a lot of students. And I have come across many adults in our audience now who tell me that A Musical Christmas Carol, or as we refer to it, AMCC, was their first experience at live theater. So this show is incredibly important to us, not just in terms of what it brings in terms of holiday joy, but in terms of developing future audiences for the theater. So this year, with the pandemic, when we worried that a tradition would not happen at a time when we could all, of course, use the comfort of tradition, we worked hard to make sure there would be a 29th year. We are so thankful for WQED, who has partnered with us to broadcast the show on their station, including a special Christmas Eve broadcast. And for our viewers not in Pittsburgh, I'm pleased to announce you're going to be available to stream the show on your computers. Audiences can experience the production with Richard Thomas as Scrooge and all of their favorite Pittsburgh actors, including, of course, Tim Hartman, Jeff Howell, Terry Wickline, Dan Krell, and many, many more. Now, look, this is possible because of the generosity of the following sponsors: KeyBank, Highmark, Howard Hanna Real Estate Services, PNC, Giant Eagle, and the Allegheny Regional Asset District, or RAD. Now, they have helped us in this program to make sure we could get this show of A Musical Christmas Carol on the air. So if you know people who work at these companies, be sure to tell them thank you. Let them know that you appreciate the support they're giving Pittsburgh CLO and the arts in our town. All right, so let me get to our first guest here. Now, look, these three young men that you're going to see are incredibly talented and incredibly interesting. So they have each played Tiny Tim. So we're going to bring them in here. We have on the screen Daniel Frantz, starting from youngest to oldest, who was Tiny Tim in 2017 and 2018, and then stayed in the show in 19 as Turkey Boy. And it's Daniel's performance that's going to be on the air in the broadcast. We also have with us Mario Williams, who was 2015 was Tiny Tim, but has also been in the show from 2012, 2013, 2014, and 2016 as a Cratchit Child and a Turkey Boy. And finally, our oldest returning Tiny Tim is Eli Tokash, who was Tiny Tim for 2009, 2010, and 2011. Now, each of these people you're about to meet have been in shows beyond Christmas Carol at CLO, and they're all former students of the Pittsburgh CLO Academy of Musical Theater that you've heard us talk about so much on the air. So let's not waste any time. Let's just invite them on the air. Let's see the guys.
Hello.
Hey, gentlemen.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Well, let's just kind of go around. We see your names on the screen, obviously, but how are you? Where are you? Tell me what's going on. We'll start with Daniel. Now, you're here in Pittsburgh still, right?
Yeah.
And are you attending school over the internet, or how are you? What's going on in your world?
We're doing online school.
And you go where?
Pittsburgh Kappa.
Yes. So you're going to Kappa studying acting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Musical theater, right. Of course. That's why you're here with us. All right. So, and Mario, you're still here in Pittsburgh, right?
Yeah, in Pittsburgh. Yeah, I'm doing all virtual right now. I go to Our Lady of the Sacred Heart High School. And
yeah. Good. And I have to say, if anyone's seen Mario on stage before recently, his voice has definitely gotten a little deeper since you were last with us in Peter Pan at the Benedum. And Eli, it's so great to have you and meet you. Where are you reaching us from?
I'm currently in New York, and I'm so excited to be here and visit the Pittsburgh roots again.
Yeah. Now, each of you played Tiny Tim. You each did it with some different Scrooges, I know, so we'll talk about that. But I kind of want to go back. So, I know each of you were students at the Academy. Do you remember your audition for the role? Anyone?
Yes.
Yeah, Eli? What do you remember about that experience? I'm curious.
I actually really didn't understand what was going on completely because it was literally my first ever audition. And the way it happened was Miss Patty Malone, who's the director at Pittsburgh CLO, she asked me to audition, and I was kind of yeah, sure. What do I have to do? And so when I walked in, I kind of just sang away in a major and then walked out, and I was like, is that all I had to do? I was so confused, and I was like, that's definitely not what I was supposed to do, but I guess that's okay. And it turns out a couple auditions later, and I was like, okay, now I'm kind of understanding this, and then eventually I got the role, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. And I was only 6 years old, so
6 years old playing Tiny Tim, and I know since then we'll talk about this. This was obviously something that hooked you. You've auditioned many times since then for lots of shows, and we'll talk about that. Mario or Daniel, do you remember your auditions?
Yeah, I remember it was my first year of classes at the Academy, and Patty came in and was like, "You should audition for this." And I ran out to my mom and I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do for this, but I want to do it. And
I see a theme happening here.
Yeah. And so I ran out. My mom was like, "Are you sure? It may be a lot of work." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm sure. I'm going to do this." So, and I think my sister ended up auditioning too. And, I don't even know. I think we were supposed to do a monologue, and I think I picked my favorite children's book and just memorized part of that and used that as my monologue and did it in a British accent. And I sang away in a major, and rest is history.
The rest is history, all those years on the stage. And what about you, Daniel?
I don't really remember how I got news. I can't remember if someone in the Academy told me or if my mom told me, but I wanted to audition for it. So I auditioned for it. And I remember, I forget what song I sang. I think it was Electricity from Billy Elliot. But
yes.
I remember I sang, and then I think the same day, after it, they chose people for callbacks the exact same day at the exact same time.
Mm-hmm.
And they gave me a part to read from the script. I think it was the train part.
Uh-huh.
And I read it. And then I remember being kind of nervous for the next few weeks. And then my mom surprising me and telling me they got the part.
Oh, good. And I'm trying to remember if it was Mario's year, and we'll talk about Mr. Jeff Howe later, but do I not remember? One of you, Jeff came in to lift all of you because he had to see if he could get you on your shoulder. Was that your year, Daniel?
Maybe.
Yeah, because, Jeff Howe plays Bob Cratchit, had to carry each of you on his shoulder, and he was always very concerned about which kid he could lift above his shoulder. So, well, that's great. And, of course, Away in the Manger is the big moment for the show. I'm sure most of our viewers have seen it, but this is this sort of solo moment with a bright light on you, on your knees. You're the only one we're listening to singing Away in the Manger. Now, it sounds like each of you were sort of new to the whole theater thing when you came in. What got you to the Academy in the first place? What was sort of the impetus to come study musical theater? Anyone?
For me, it was, I think, it was my sister Lucia did Cats, the summer camp, and I went and saw it, and I was like, I didn't like the show at all, but I was like, hey, yeah, I want to do that too, and then I just got enrolled in classes that fall.
Oh, that's great. And I think if I remember correctly from reading this, Eli, you have a similar story, right?
I do. Very similar. Mario and I have a lot of similarities. Same way, my sister actually ended up doing Chitty Chitty Bang Bang at the Benedum. And then I ended up and then a bunch of CLO Academy kids were in it, and we weren't associated with it at the time. So we were asking other families that were in the show with my sister, and they were like, oh, there's the CLO Academy, and oh, there she is. That's my sister. So we ended up going to the CLO Academy, and we did the summer camps. And then that's when Miss Patty was like, oh, you should audition for our holiday show too. And I was like, okay. I'm like, yeah.
Oh, well, that's great. So as you think back, I mean, some of you, it's a little further away. What are the sort of the memories that first pop in your mind when you think about your time doing Christmas Carol? And each of you did it for multiple years. Obviously you kept coming back, or we kept asking. What is it you remember most? I'm just curious. What about you, Daniel? You're the most recent. What is it you think about when you think about your experience in the show?
The things I remember most are probably rehearsal. I don't remember a lot of individual moments from rehearsals. Obviously, there are a lot that I could pick out, but some of them I don't remember. But I remember the whole rehearsal together. I just remember the feeling, and also I remember opening night, and I always remember the cast party because that's really fun.
Yes, and you have a very special thing. We have for those who have not been to a cast party, we like to get a cake that has the company's name on it. And Daniel every year would have to find his name and a piece of cake that had his name on it. Somewhere I have a photo of you at that first party doing that. What about you, Mario? What sort of things do you remember or think about back on those experiences?
You mentioned Jeff Howe, I can go on and on about that, but I think my first year was probably the dressing rooms. We have our own third floor at the Biome. We got our own our own whole floor, and we decorated our dressing rooms every year. And I think I just had so much fun because it was just me not having to worry about anything, just me having fun with, my sister for a few years and just a bunch of other people. And I still talk to a lot of the kids.
So you still have friends that you guys did it with? Oh, look, there's Lucia, your sister.
Yeah. I still talk to Felicia every once in a while. I talk to Grace Venzel, Abigail Gilman. I talked to a few of them. Yeah.
That's great. I know the kids become a very special tight group. I mean, it's something I enjoy watching backstage, is watching these kids come downstairs, all ages, go get their microphone, get in there. You're treated like adults. There's nobody really, taking care of we have our child wrangler or whatever we call it, the young actor supervisor that takes care of you guys. But for the most part, you're on your own and treated as professionals. What about you, Eli? What sort of things, you're furthest away from this. What is it that sticks in your mind as a memory?
So there's two things. So one is I will never forget. Every time Jeff and I were off stage during the big holiday party that everyone was on stage for, but me and Jeff.
Yes.
We would always play crossword puzzle games in the newspaper every day, and we would I was too young to actually help, but I would give him ideas, and he was like, oh my god, wait, that kind of makes sense. That is always something that I will always remember of Jeff and my time at A Christmas Carol. But also I'll never forget too, my first year, it was my first show I ever did, and the stage manager Rebecca at the time, she literally wrote out every piece of movement that Tiny Tim did in my binder, because I was just this was new to me. And she kind of did it in a way that I would understand it. And kind of in like a playbook, like a sports playbook. And like, so it was just super like helpful the way that she did it. And I will always like remember having that support system that like, no matter what, I was like, there was someone to help me.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, this is my times backstage, what a family it becomes and the sort of, connections you guys have. I think the other thing, I guess, for me is, as young people, there's 5 of you, I think. We have Cratchit Children and they play Turkey Boy, and Want and Ignorance, the other 2 parts, but it's all the same kids. You're the only kids. You have the adults. What is it like to be a child actor with all these adults? And some of them have done the show for years. Tim Hartman, I guess, has done that role all but 1 year, and Jeff Howell. Is that stressful for you as a young person, or were you just clueless? You didn't know what was happening, or do you like being the only kids involved?
For me, I think I was so young that I didn't really think about it. But looking back on it, I think that all the adults really did make it really special for the kids. Mm-hmm. They didn't make it seem like we were less than or anything. It was just a lot of fun, and I think that a lot of credit goes to all the grown-ups.
Yeah. Anyone else? Thoughts on that?
I think the adults, I wasn't nervous around them. I kind of just admired them for how hard they worked. And also it was really cool. First day of rehearsal, I remember walking in and everyone, since it's a reoccurring thing, everyone already knew their lines and where to go. Like, it was like they knew the show before they even got to learn the show.
Yeah, and we do this rehearsal pretty quickly, a week and a half, really, in terms of what happens. So let's talk about your Scrooges, because, obviously you guys talk about Jeff Howell, and we'll talk about that a little more. But each of you, I know, Eli, you worked with Tom Atkins as Scrooge.
Yes.
And Daniel, you were with Patrick and Richard, right?
Yeah.
Both Patrick Page and Richard Thomas. And Mario, who was your Scrooge?
For when I was Tiny Tim, it was Tom. Yeah, it
was Tom. What do you guys remember about that relationship? Because it's like you get the big moment at the end. God bless us, everyone. What did you take away from your Scrooges? Those are all three of those gentlemen are incredible actors. Did you establish relationships with your Scrooges? Did you follow them or learn anything from them as actors?
I would say most. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Eli. Yeah, go ahead, Eli.
I would say most definitely. I mean, literally, after like the 3 years, Tom literally became like a second grandpa. And honestly, I'll never forget of my last performance doing A Christmas Carol. He whispered to me as he was picking me up, "I don't know how much longer I'm going to do this. You're too tall." and fortunately, he never had to do it again. And that will forever be like, that was like my last memory of Tom. And that will always be the one that sticks in my head.
As you became the not so tiny Tim anymore.
Yeah, right.
What about you guys, Mario or Daniel? What's your lessons in acting?
I was already really close with Tom because I had already done it for, I think, 3 years. So I was already really close. He was really close with, all the kids. But like Eli, he did make, it was my 4th year doing it. So I was bigger than a normal Tiny Tim. So he always made the remark that he was like, "Oh, you're so big, kid. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to pick you up tonight." And so that was always fun. And he's just a really great guy. Yeah.
Oh, good. And Dan, you've had 2 Scrooges, both incredible actors in their own right. Patrick Page, who left us because he had to go to this little show called Hadestown. And then, of course, Richard came in, who just, again, 2 very different Scrooges. What do you take away from your Scrooge experiences?
I really admired them watching them work because I remember they always came in a bit after rehearsal started. I don't think either one of them were there on the first day of rehearsal. Right. So it was always this big moment when they came in because I remember people would have to like pretend to be Scrooge and act out Scrooge. And like it was like when they came in for the first time, you really got a sense of, oh, this is how the show is going to go. Yeah. And that was really fun. And also with Richard Thomas, I have a memory of sometimes after the show, after like the lights dimmed down and my microphone went off, I would whisper in his ear, "Good night, Tomboy," and it was always no, not Tomboy.
John Boy, but yeah, I'm sure do you even know that show, The Waltons, that Richard was on? No.
No.
No, Richard, all three of those gentlemen, again, put their heart. Tom played it for multiple years, and they've all put their heart and soul in this. And like I said, I think it's great that we offer this opportunity, as I think I've said in previous, to audition for a CLO show, whether it's Summer or Christmas Carol. We use our students, and I think that says a lot. And all three of you actually have done, as I said, other shows. Eli, I know I was checking, you did Oliver and JC Superstar, right?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. So was it a different experience moving over to the Benedum, or were you an old pro by then?
It was very different, to be honest, because instead of going to the third floor, we got to go to the basement, so we didn't have to go up all those stairs. So that was really nice. And then just working with like the new people, but also like having that, because I worked with Joey Serafini in A Christmas Carol, and then we also did Oliver together. So like having like those familiar faces from the first day was also very helpful. So like. Great. Yeah, so it definitely was different, but in a way it was different in a good way, because like I had the experience and I started to know more people in the Pittsburgh like group and all of that. So yeah, it was great.
Great. And I know, Mario, you of course did several shows for us, Peter Pan, and you did Michael and Mary Poppins when you were much shorter and your voice was a little bit lower. And Daniel, you played Chip in Beauty and the Beast for us. You got pushed around and rode in a cart with those people. What was your thoughts as you moved to the other shows? Because obviously Christmas Carol is such a family, and you did it every year, multiple years. What was the thoughts as you moved to the Benedum and to the summer season? Either of you.
With Beauty and the Beast, it felt kind of weird not having other kids there.
Right, you were truly the only kid in that show.
Yes. It felt kind of weird because I remember I had my own dressing room and I was like, I'm lonely, but
you're a very social really young man.
I remember talking to my child wrangler a lot, and we had a lot of fun. And I don't know how to describe it, because of course it's different going to different theaters, but there also is that part that feels the same throughout any theater you perform in.
All right, yeah, great. And Mario?
I think Mary Poppins was the first time that wasn't Christmas Carol. Yeah, it was a lot different, and it was also a very daunting role as a 10-year-old. I think Eli knows very well.
Yes, he does.
It was very tricky going into it. I was really nervous because I only had one other kid. I only had Claire, and my sister wasn't there. Until that point, my sister was like my rock going into a lot of the shows. So. But I still look back on it. It's one of the best experiences in theater I think I've ever had. It was magical when it all came together. It was a lot of fun.
I think that was my second year at CLO, and I have to say I remember both you and Claire, because I coached you for a while, prep, but when you guys did, I mean, I'm watching you dance and do the tap dance stuff. You guys looked like you were so happy. I just remember the joy that you're like these two kids getting to do this show. And again, it's like Daniel being the only one at Chip. You two were the only kids in the show, and I just remember the cast and everybody looping around. But you also kind of, because we also got you some of the movement in advance. So the cast is like, what's going on with them? Now, Eli, these two are still here in school. You left us and moved on to some other things. You did the national tours of Mary Poppins, you said, and you've also, like you did on Broadway, Pippin and Finding Neverland. What's been the journey for you as a young actor leaving Pittsburgh and emerging as a professional?
Well, I would have never moved to New York if it wasn't for Bruce Barnes, who was the music director of A Christmas Carol. And he was the one that kind of said, just go out there and try it. And like, we literally hopped on a bus and like just went out and tried it and tried to get agents, and then like we started auditioning. And literally my first audition, like for outside of Pittsburgh, I booked that one too. So a lot of first auditions were able to come together. And so just that experience was, I'm so thankful for it, just because it would have never happened without A Christmas Carol. And then just like, I feel leaving at a young age, just where you're from and like your hometown, you don't really grasp it as much as you do when you're older. And I feel like I was able to get out at the best time because I didn't have like the emotional attachments that I really, really could have had at like an older age when you understand those things. So like now I feel them, but you know, being able to get all that experience at such a young age was just amazing, and just an incredible experience to just go from new show to new show and around the world to staying in one place in New York, and then ended up landing in New York and staying here. I'm just really thankful for all the opportunities that I've been given.
Well, and I will have to say, CeeLo is incredibly proud of you and what you've done. I heard of you many times before I ever met you or saw you. But, you know, I think watching so many young people, it's something we're very proud of, is nurturing homegrown talent and launching some careers. So you've each brought up a certain gentleman, and Mr. Howell, Jeff, who played Bob Cratchit for a number of years. So I have a surprise for you. Can we bring our surprise on the screen?
Hi, guys!
This is Jeff Howell, everyone. Who played
so
Bob Cratchit for how many years, Jeff?
25.
Yes, and then he retired last year, but you know, you're going to do one more year with us on the video. So
from Bob Cratchit, I retired from Bob Cratchit. From
I know you guys around. Well, all right, that's true. That's true. So you've worked with. I mean, when you were the big retirement party last year, we brought back a bunch of Tiny Tims, including people that I think were now 35 years old, right, Jeff?
Yes.
What do you remember about these three? Because this, you know, there's some of the recent ones. This is your chance to tell us what you think of these three young actors.
Okay, I mean, they were all great. They were all hysterical. They were all like little pros when it came to everything. I mean, they were great. But Daniel, we could not get him to stay quiet. He talked all the time. I mean, until we stepped on stage, he was talking into my ear. Eli danced off stage. He would shake his hiney and he would dance around and he would sing and he would until we walked on stage. And Mario was the worst Secret Santa secret keeper that there ever was. There was.
Let's first let everybody know that. So there's a Secret Santa tradition among the cast that I know Daniel loved. So, but you're saying Mario was not the right one, huh?
He was my Secret Santa one year, and in the dressing room, this basket came and it had all kinds of stuff in it. And Tim Hartman and McCrae and we were digging through everything, looking at it, and we pulled out something. And Mario goes, "I didn't know we got you that." Oh, I mean,
I was never good at hiding any of my gifts. It was like through the whole experience, I was so bad at hiding everything.
Oh, well, Jeff, I know you worked with so many Tiny Tims, had to carry them on your shoulder, had to walk. I mean, you again, as Eli references, that you like have the only two moments off stage, you know, sitting with them,
right?
You know, what made you keep coming back other than we kept asking?
Oh my gosh, this was it is to me the most fun you can have in a year. We cram that much fun into those 4 weeks that we're all 3.5, 4 weeks that we're all together. I heard McCrae say one time. McCrae is the music director, played and conducted. I asked him once, I said, well, why do you come back all this time? And he said, it's the only place I know where when I come in the stage door, when it closes, I start laughing, and we laugh all the way through everything, every day, every show, until that stage door closes and we go back. And we're still laughing down the street as we're walking away. It's just so much fun. So much fun. In fact, that's why I had there was one year that Chris Rawson came backstage with us, because he had asked me, he said, well, I've reviewed, I don't know how many times. And he said, what can I possibly say? And I said, well, the big show is backstage. That's where the craziness is going on. I mean, it's a zoo. You guys know, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. so he came back and watched, and he was fascinated by the fact that, like, Tiny Tim could be talking to Scrooge backstage, telling him a joke, and then we all just turn and walk on stage. He said he thought that was just amazing.
That's, I think, more credit to Greg Brooks, who runs the soundboard, that your mic doesn't turn on at that point.
Yes.
Very trusting. Like, I can't imagine being that trusting on things. But, and again, to see Eli now off in New York doing his thing, and Daniel's, of course, at Kappa, and Mario's now 6 feet tall or something. I mean, do you measure your life by Tiny Tim's? I'm just curious,
yeah.
Jim.
Well, in fact, Paul Packler, who was the first, he did it for, I want to say 3 years,
right.
3 years, and he was Tiny Tim, and he came back probably, I think, 10 years into it, and I actually picked him up and put him on my shoulder. It was outside. Yeah, I was on the street, and everybody's like, "Watch your back! Watch your back!"
Well, I was saying earlier, I do remember like an audition or two where I like Jeff come in and lift these kids.
Yeah.
No, not that you just got in because you were light, but it did help Jeff's opinion.
Yeah.
It did. 60 pounds was kind of the limit. It was like, if you weigh over 60, you're going to hear every time I
well, I know it must be exciting to see each other, and and for us to be able to broadcast the show this year is really special to us, as we can't be together. And I know some of you are going to get to see the show. Jeff, you'll see the show for the first time.
I've never seen it. No.
I mean, Mario sat in the audience, I guess, but Daniel's never.
That's the first time I ever saw it.
Yeah, 28 years, 29. So like I said, Charlie Gray was going to do it once.
When you first saw it, what was your impression of it then?
It was so much different because in my head I'd seen it off stage, so I thought that I had an idea of what it was going to be like, but it really is a lot. I understand why people go back every year, even though they know they're getting the same thing. It really is magical to watch.
Yeah.
Were you saying the lines along with everybody?
I knew what was going to happen next. Yeah, I knew the lines. Yeah.
Well, good. Well, I'm so thrilled you guys joined us. We're going to have another special guest coming up after this. Mr. David Bell is joining me to talk about the adaptions. Eli, thanks so much for making time for us, and best of luck in New York as you continue your studies. And Daniel, we can't wait to see you on the screen. And I know you're keeping busy with Kappa and Mario. It is always a pleasure to see you. Jeff, not so much.
I hear that all the time.
So thank you, gentlemen. And we'll be seeing you soon. Bye.
Thank you all. Bye.
Wow, that was fun. Those boys have a lot of energy. So let me get to my second guest. As I mentioned, it's David Bell, who's currently a professor and director of music theater at Northwestern University outside of Chicago. And in addition to that, for 25 plus years, he has been an internationally in-demand director, writer, adapter, and educator. But for us, he's known to us as the original adapter and director of a musical Christmas Carol at Pittsburgh. And I have to say, as you'll discover, he is also one of the sweetest human beings you will ever meet, either in the theater or in the world in general. So let's welcome my good friend, David Bell. David!
Mark, it's
How
so
are
good
you,
to see you,
sir?
my friend.
How are things in Evanston?
Good. It's
Yeah?
nice. It's a nice, good day and no storms. I love it.
No storms. And you're teaching online musical theater, or are you guys in person as well?
It's pretty much all online. I managed to teach, I think, 3 classes in person, but we're just finishing up the fall quarter and about to take a break. Although all the students are already off campus.
Right, they're calling in from all over the world.
Yeah, exactly right.
How's been the adjustment for you? I mean, you've probably done video conferences in your career, but
because what I've taught was I taught writing for music theater in the spring, and I just finished teaching directing, and with extraordinary students in both cases, and it seemed very much like a normal class.
Right.
And in fact, because the students weren't doing 20 different things and being in shows, they were astounding. They just stepped up at every turn. It was great.
Oh, that's great.
I worry a little more about teaching my acting class in the winter.
In the winter, right. Yeah, I can imagine. Well, we've brought you back, of course, to talk about a musical Christmas Carol, which now is, can you believe, 29 years? since Charlie Gray saw you. Now, this show, I want to make sure you were the adapter. You took it from Dickens, and the original sort of impetus. I know when you were artistic director at Ford's Theater in DC, you created a show for them, and we'll talk about kind of the different ones. But what was the impetus for you to create this show for Ford's, and what were sort of your goals as you went into that?
Well, it had never been my intention to adapt the piece at all. Frankie Hewitt, who was the producer at Ford's and a wonderful producer and a wonderful human being, I love her to this day and miss her, asked me to, see what adaptation or version I would like to do. And so I spent the November before we decided what show to do, traveling to virtually every company in the United States that did a production of Christmas Carol. And I saw them all. I saw about 10 productions at various theaters all over the country. And I didn't love any of them. And in sitting with Frankie, I said, you know what, I think there are a few that are close, but I don't really love them. And she said, well, shall we do our own? And I went, yes. And strangely, my parents were in Australia that year. So I happened to be in New York very much on my own for Christmas. Right. So I went home I went to my apartment in New York around the 19th, 20th of December. And by the 4th of January, I'd finished the script and indeed wrote some of the most moving scenes on Christmas Day. Thoroughly sorry for myself in a wonderfully kind of Dickensian way. Yeah. And I think all of that, I was very much missing my parents and very much feeling alone. And that was all allowed me to connect with Christmas as what it means culturally and familially, in a way that just transcends the literature. It suddenly was very, very important to me. And then writing the script was important. And then a year later, we inaugurated at Ford's. It went very well. And then it was after 2 years at Ford's, I think Charlie came on board and asked me to bring a version up to Pittsburgh.
Right. And did it have the songs at Ford's as well?
Songs. Yeah. It always had music, but we added music. McCrae Hardy, a wonderful friend and music director, came on board, and he and I expanded the score. Right. So now it feels like a mixture of a concert, a Christmas concert, and a film score. Right. But it all is woven together to use traditional Christmas carols to kind of segue between one scene and the other and to integrate them into the fabric of the storytelling.
So, the story is, I was talking to someone the other day, like, even if you've never read it, the story, that God Bless Us Everyone, Three Ghosts, Bah Humbug. What was it? Were you really familiar with the novella? Did you dive into it? Did you know Scrooge?
I wasn't really into it that much until I was assigned to adapt it. Then I read it, and it wasn't what I had anticipated. Strangely, when I directed, and I've directed about 50 of the productions all over the country over the years. When I directed, I always start saying, I think dealing with any piece of literature that's part of the cultural ether, everyone knows it, whether they know it or not. If you're going to start directing Hamlet, you are in orbit of everyone thinking they know what the show is. Right. And in fact, the trick is to tell it as if no one has ever heard it before and discover all of those moments. The thing that I really didn't like about a lot of the productions that I had seen elsewhere is everybody was so excited to get to the special effects. And they just kind of ran through what they considered clearly by seeing the show, the boring bits, which is setting up this wonderful, lonely, isolated man who is in desperate need of redemption, of being saved. And when the pyrotechnics come, then it is in orbit of a purpose, of a reason. They are part of his path to redemption. And it's rewarding that way in a unique way.
How did you also have written shows? You're a writer as well as an adapter. One of the things you're really known for is Hot Mikado, which was a jazz version of the Gilbert and Sullivan Show. Do you see the role as adapter versus, I don't mean true writer, but writing an original story different, or are they similar to you?
Well, they are similar in that it demands dramatic invention. I went on to have the version that's just ending at the Alliance Theater last year was its last season, and they have commissioned me to write the new one. So I'm writing yet another version, which will be my 6th version of Christmas Carol. And when they did a survey asking the audience which scenes could they not live without, and I laughed because about half of them, in the name of you've got to preserve the original Dickens, were scenes that I had invented. Specifically, the Fezziwig foreclosure scene. The whole end of the first act is one of my favorite bits of the show, which actually connects the disparate parts of the storytelling, and they all kind of come under one roof with one purpose. And it was thrilling to find, and it was thrilling to write. And I loved it when I heard from the Atlanta audience that whatever you do, you can't lose the original Dickens foreclosure scene.
Again, no one's really read it.
Yeah.
But, I think that you kind of referenced this, and I think what is so great in all the different versions, that there's not these cookie cutter approaches, that you really have approached the cities. I mean, obviously the Alliance in Atlanta when you were the associate artistic director, CLO, you actually just did one 2 years ago for Dolly Parton, a Smoky Mountain Christmas Carol. This is a 2-part question. How do you go about finding the sort of specificity for the new theater location? And then I'd love to know what's special in your mind about the CLO production as opposed to the others.
Well, how I go about it is really, I look at the elements of the story that are not explored by Dickens. And it is astounding, particularly the Christmas Past. There are all kinds of threads that are laid out that don't necessarily have an ending. So there's a profound number of great beginnings that then get kind of dropped, like the way you live a life, where things pop out or drop back in. And in connecting those dots, I felt agency to connect them in slightly different ways every time. In the first production, Frankie really wanted a very British production, something that seemed very traditional. You're at the nation's capital, as international a city as they get. She wanted a really Victorian panorama of England and at Christmas. And then I did it in Los Angeles afterwards with the fellow from The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, Edward Mulhare, and it was done in thrust, and we started to play with a much less literal visual world of the show. And that then evolved to the production that we have at Pittsburgh, where we took away the sense of actual street scenes and instead kind of placed everything in a warehouse full of a lifetime's worth of foreclosures of really odd things, from a carriage to a pulpit. And that's when I really found the voice of the show visually at Pittsburgh. And the other thing is, because it's Civic Light Opera, Charlie really wanted me to include a lot more music. So with McRae's help, we really addressed the score and tried to find any opportunity we can to have it sing more. So it felt more like a musical than it has in other places we've gone. When I went to Atlanta, it's the first company that had over half the cast was African American, and the music kind of absorbed a kind of Christmas gospel overtone at moments, which again was just thrilling to explore. And all of the communities, I think, deserve and frankly demand their own Christmas Carol. So it feels homegrown.
You mentioned some of the visual as well. And there's your team, Martine Bookwalter, who did the set, Andy Ostrowski, who's done lighting, and Marianne Verheyen. And we brought them in 2 or 3 years ago now to really start to revamp the physical world. Is that an association with those three that kind of over time you've developed this look, or did it come from Martine? Or because obviously the physical world is important.
Martine came up with this idea, and I just hated it. Los Angeles. And I just get the clutter. There's just clutter everywhere. And then, somewhere in the middle of the process, I learned to embrace my inner clutter. And the very clutter actually provided a dimension to the visual world that, like memories, like the accumulation of memories over a lifetime, it is indistinct. You don't know where one thing starts and one other thing is left off, and what you're overwhelmed by a plethora of detail. You see a lot of detail, and the whole kind of keeps shifting. And I loved it. By the time we opened in Los Angeles, and I think I won the show won a Best Production award. I won a Director award. And Martine won a Design award. It was so innovative, but it was a thrust. So it was a very different physical construct than the one we have at the Biome. And then, but when it came here, we brought Martine out and Marianne, whose work I've always loved, and it just took on a life here, and it is my visually favorite show, particularly because you and Van spent the time and effort to really, over the last 3 years, just update it. And it was feeling a little worn around the edges, and it was so thrilled to see it, as fresh as a new penny.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, for those who are watching, we raised part of our Next Generation Capital campaign to refresh it. And it is truly, I think Van was very serious when we talked about this. It's a refresher. It's not a totally new set. Right. Although it was interesting because I had people that what happened to? I'm like, it's there, or didn't it used to? I'm like, no, it never did that. Yeah. But I also know, from seeing video and following the Atlanta and Alliance, is even Marianne picking, because it's Pittsburgh and it's the Northeast, the costumes are heavier, the cloaks, versus Atlanta, which feels a little more sleeves and vests, which I think that's even showing your physical world reflecting its audience as well. So I thought that was great. Yeah. What, obviously, as a writer, I mean, the scripts are the blueprint that we kind of bounce around in. And we've had we've had many, from Ed Lindeck, who was the original, Tom Atkins, we've had Richard and Patrick and Mark last year. How have you seen the impact of the different Scrooges on the show?
It's even greater. The different casts changed the show, and no one more than Scrooge. Right. Patrick came in and just schooled me on a brand new version of the character. Right. In many ways, harsher. In many ways, more elegant, definitely more lonely, and Ed Lindeck was, a prototype Scrooge, very much of the old world. He'd created the Judge in Sweeney Todd. He's one of my favorite actors, one of the greatest human beings to work on stage with you can possibly imagine, and I loved the first years of directing him in it, but every year since, starting with Edward Mulhare, again, a very different character. And I walked in and it was just, a different show. And then I've always loved Richard. I saw him do Richard II at the Shakespeare Theater in Washington, and one of the most amazing productions ever. And he has a gentleness and a humanity that's just part of him. Right. And I will be seeing his performance for the first time next week. And I am jumping out of my skin because I know he will school me on yet another Christmas Carol. Yeah. And I love it. I love all of it.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, for me, not many shows get done every year. And for me as a director, producer, I'm sure for the cast, to watch different people or to watch the show grow has been something I've loved. Like you said, I joke that Patrick was truly the scariest man in town. Yeah. But that set up, you talked about redemption, his laughter and giddiness is the price of redemption scene had such a contrast. I mean, I'll never forget the first night we was giggling. And then you have Richard, who you were hoping gets changed. It's just such an interesting thing to watch.
It also paints a very different picture of where the story starts. I think there's something wonderful about a person who is at a time in his life when he realizes everything he wants is a little hollow.
Yeah.
Or the person who has realized and received everything he ever wanted and allows the show to actually lead him through the process of discovering, first, it's hollow, and second, that you don't have to live there. But all of that, it just makes a much more interesting psychological journey for whomever is driving the ship, and Scrooge certainly does that.
It's interesting that we keep bringing in new Scrooges, and I kept watching. It's like the reality is Scrooge is such an observer in the show.
Yes.
That in some ways he's like, it's that idea that it's actually bringing him as interesting because that other company is so close and most of them have done it so multiple times that there is a sort of cocoon that actor is reacting to. But I've also seen, as you said, that cast even shift and morph and change way Bob Cratchit, Jeff would react with his Scrooge, or Justin playing Fred.
And particularly the young Scrooge, because the question for a young Scrooge when he makes his first entrance as a hope-filled schoolboy is, how did that kid get to be Patrick Page as opposed to Mark Jacoby, as opposed to Richard Thomas? And that, I think that is a challenge for the whole company, because they are all part of the journey that leads Scrooge down the path that is irreparable, that is damaging. And so the question is, when you change the end result, you change where he ends up in this story, where he starts, you kind of have to then reconfigure how he got there. And you have wonderful actors. Luke did a wonderful young Scrooge for a couple of seasons, and working with Erica, and the two of them actually charted a Belle and a young Scrooge that allowed me to really see how a different Scrooge was the result of a different young Scrooge.
Of a choice, right? Yeah, I know for me, what I still talk about, my favorite scenes are those young Scrooge scenes. The Dan Krell as the Marley non-ghost, and bringing him over, nothing evil, just come be a part of my business, and especially that section, the tracking of the decisions. I mean, from the breakup with Belle to the are you coming partner, those sort of things are really sort of, you're watching these decisions be made and played out. And for someone who's now seen it, I don't know how many times, and especially in the editing of the television version, more than I've ever seen. It's been great. Now, has the show, now that should be a question, has it ever been broadcast?
No, this is the very first time. I'm really excited. I have to say, I've had this kind of, I've had the strangest year as everyone else has had.
Yeah.
And I'm not generally or temperamentally sentimental, but there's something about you calling me up and saying there's a possibility that all of Christmas is not gone, and there is one corner of the world that will get to share this show that you helped create, Christmas Carol, that I care so much about, that actually turned my entire year around. It was a redemption of its own sort. 2020 is going to be filled with hope and light, because at the end of it, we get to see this wonderful story about hope and light.
Yeah. I mean, I've said it before in interviews I've done already about this, that look, canceling the summer season, canceling the cabaret, shutting down the school, all hard. But the idea of not doing Christmas Carol was, because you heard from those young boys and Jeff, because it is that company on stage and backstage that spills out over the footlights to the audience. And, we just saw a woman put her post up that she had been coming for 16 years with her mom. Wow. And the idea of taking what's been a holiday tradition, that was the thing Van and I just could not fathom, in the CLO staff. So to have WQED step up as a partner, to have those donors come in that we'll talk about later, I can't say enough. And I hope that enough people, and because it's going to stream, we will see other audiences hopefully follow that. Maybe people want a production in their town, but it means a lot. As we kind of wrap up, I'm going to take it a little further out. You're a very thoughtful man. We've had some rather wonderful conversations. We head into the challenges of winter that they're saying is a little darker, but we look to the hope on the other side. How are you viewing our art form, theater, as its role in the healing or its role in reopening the community? Do you have a sense? Have you thought much about that?
Of course, yeah. I teach at Northwestern Music Theater, and it seems at once a form in jeopardy, and it also doesn't. There were years growing up in New York and working professionally through the years of the Fabulous Invalid, which was a label theater has been ascribed over time. And in the 70s, late 60s, 70s, 80s, there's just no one knew if it was going to survive New York. And it's come back stronger than ever. And it has survived plagues before. It has survived Puritans before. It has survived waves of closing and feeling that it will be at loss. But for me, and this is very personal, for me, there's something so spiritual about being in a congregation, if you will, a group of people bearing witness to an important message that it is a thing that is a needful thing. And I feel that those people who don't know what it is or miss it during the pandemic will find their way to stories that are being told in that manner in front of other people.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've said this a couple of times that, the theater to me is what happens in the air between artist and performer. And
it is.
I probably told this story on the show already. We had a group of students go sing live outdoors at a thing the ballet was creating called the Open Air Series. And I had not realized how much I'd missed the idea of live.
Right.
I've watched the streaming shows like you have, and I've watched theater and I'm rooting friends on, and but those kids opened up their voices and something about that. We had Sarah Jean Ford on a couple of weeks ago from our Oklahoma, and she was like, I think I will probably burst into tears the minute I sing for the first time in public. I think there's just something about that, since Thespis stepped out of the chorus 2,500 years ago, that idea of being together in a room.
Right.
And I think that's what's really hurting us. And that's why coming into Christmas with us not able to gather with families and friends like we did, to at least have this virtually. And I know, David, you're going to be watching. You're going to help us with some events we're going to do around the show.
I cannot.
But I guess I just have to say thank you, David. I mean, for this gift you've given Pittsburgh, for this 29-year tradition. It would not have gone forward without the work and the heart that's in there, and the artists you've brought us over time, from Scott Evans, who's directed the last couple of years and helped me with the edit, to the actors. And so I just, again, it's not our opportunity we get a chance to, in front of all of our fans, say thank you. You've done something incredible for this community. So where you go, Dick McCrae, David Bell is a treasure. I'm so glad to have the chance to work with him both here and elsewhere. That's McCrae, our music director. So David, I hope you spend the holidays and have some joy. And we will have you watching. And I can't wait to hear what you think about the show as we put it together with Richard and all these people. You haven't had a chance to see it, so I'm really excited.
What I think you and Van always know, and Pittsburgh should know, it is you all who give me the gift, not the other way around.
Well, thank you. And you're a dear friend, and it means the world to have spoken with you today in this way. We never really get this kind of time because of putting the shows up, which is kind of the odd thing, right? We've had more time for conversations with this, and I've connected with more people. But David, the best as the semester ends, and we'll talk soon, all right?
You take
You're the
care,
best. Bye. Thank you, David. Oh, this episode is getting to me in the heart as well as in the holiday spirit. And how about you? Look, I can't wait to see a musical Christmas Carol on TV. The first broadcast is going to be Thursday, December 10th at 7:30 p.m. on WQED here in Pittsburgh. And if you want to increase your musical Christmas Carol joy, we have actually planned 2 special events on the 10th. First, we have Schmooze with Scrooge at 6:30 p.m. Now, this is a virtual party with Richard Thomas and David Bell that we'll be doing over Zoom. So you have the chance to actually interact, ask your own questions. And then after the broadcast at 9:30, we're doing a virtual cast party. So you can join us, meet the cast. They've created some special videos they want to share, and memories and more, as we celebrate this 29th year and the victory that we've been able to share it with our Pittsburgh audiences. Now, both VIP experiences come with some special gifts and treats, which are in our Christmas Carol in a box that they're creating in the office. Our little elves are busy doing this, and they're going to deliver it to your door. With a CLO elf will take it to you. But yeah, I'm going to have to say hurry. You must sign up tomorrow, Friday, December 4th, in order to make sure you can receive your box on time. But of course, you can sign up and view the show even if you don't get your box. There is a fee associated with these, which are donations to CLO to help us as we navigate these challenging times. If you want to know how to find more about the box, the show, the broadcasts, visit pittsburghclo.org. You'll see all the details there on our website. And I also have to say, if you're a teacher watching this broadcast, we would welcome the chance to make a musical Christmas carol available for your classroom in December for free via streaming. And we could also provide you with an actor or two, excuse me, from the show for a virtual talkback with your students. Just reach out to us, that email I showed at the beginning, or through the CLO website, and we'll make the arrangements. The 7,000 students that come each year make this incredibly special, and we want to make sure this is available for them as well. And again, thanks to our sponsors. Now, before we go, I want to thank our guests for being with us today. David and Eli and Daniel and Mario, and of course, Jeff Howe making a surprise appearance. Those boys were certainly surprised. You can see the impact that Jeff has had on their lives. But I also want to shout out to our behind the scenes team, which is Becca and Sid. Let's see yourselves. Show that, yeah, there's our control room from all over the city. Isn't the internet a wonderful thing? Plus, of course, I want to thank Steph, who creates all of our graphics, and our theme music was composed by Adam Overett. Now, our next episode on December 17th is another Christmas Carol special. I'm calling it The Three Scrooges. Past CLO Scrooges, Mark Jacoby, Patrick Page, and Richard Thomas will join me for a conversation about the character of Scrooge and their individual approaches to the role in the CLO production. Now, it's going to be an enlightening discussion, not just about Scrooge, but about the craft of acting. These are three master actors. If you are a fan of either of them or the role of Scrooge or acting, gather around. I think it's going to be a great conversation. All right, so that just leaves us with our Throwback Thursday video, and you probably guessed what it's going to be. To get you even more in the mood, here are highlights from the 2018 production of A Musical Christmas Carol starring Richard Thomas. So until we meet again, I'm Mark Fleischer, hoping that during these challenging times, you are able to be close up with someone you love. Good night.
Love and joy come to you, and to you your wassail too, and God bless you and send you a happy new year, and God send you a happy new year.
Out with your singing! We are still attempting to do a day's work for a day's wages. Bah! Humbug! Marley? Jacob Marley? Are you the spirit whose coming was foretold me?
I am.
Who and what are you?
I am the ghost of Christmas past.
What is long past?
No, your past.
Look! Gold sovereign! That man is solid gold!
Solid gold Fezziwig.
Herr Fezziwig, we are going to sing a song for you.
On Christmas night all creation sings together, new as the angels ring. On Christmas night all creation sings together, new as the angels ring. News of great joy, news of great birth, news of our merciful King's birth. It's made of the good maple tree, from the walls in good drink unto thee. A sail all over the town, our praise is white and our age is brown.
In a manger, no crib for a bed, the little Lord Jesus laid down his sweet head.
Deck the hall with boughs of holly, fa la 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 la.
'Tis the season to be jolly, fa la 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 la.
Was I the corpse then?
Oh, Lord have mercy!
Oh, it's real. And 5 shillings a week. Well, Merry Christmas, Mr. Scrooge.
Oh, come, Tim! You're riding on the top of the Henson with me. It's an adventure you'll not soon forget. What say you to that?
God bless us.
everyone.
Glory to the new